You're listening to 94.4 FM Salford City Radio, the Friday Sports Show.
You're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show with your host Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing you news from the local area and around the world. We bring the world to Salford and Salford to the rest of the world. We're very fortunate in this show to interview some of the world's best athletes, sports school coaches, sports psychologists. We also have a segment featuring some of the world's most influential people in the field of psychology and related fields. Today we have a really interesting guest who's going to share some really, no doubt, interesting insights into his work. He's worked as a head coach, high performance coach, an attack, backs and skills coach in rugby, which should be interesting really, particularly for our rugby fans or anyone really who just enjoys watching rugby. There's probably nothing more exciting than seeing a backline movement, so I'm sure we'll know a bit more about how and what he does around that. So it's Rory Teague. Welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's great to speak to you, Rory. So how did it begin for you? How did you sort of get involved in sort of performance coaching and sort of your role around doing backs and skills work?
I guess whilst playing, I always had an interest in coaching and coached my local rugby club, and always happy to go out and do the community work within the clubs that I played in.
Yeah.
And then from that, I was really keen to stay in the sport, and my love of rugby and family tradition kept me in rugby. So I guess I just wanted to still keep living the dream, I guess.
Yeah.
From playing into coaching. So that's how I got into it. And being a fly half fullback, I guess you sometimes naturally gravitate towards the skill, passing, kicking, developmental side of the game, and that's where initially took me at the beginning. Where I worked in Harrow School, progressed in the Terraces Academy, and then worked in some international and pro team environments.
Mm-hmm. And what's it been like for you, Rory? The journey so far. Obviously, you're a player and you've got the experience. You've worked under different coaches. But what's the journey been like making the transition to coaching for yourself? I mean, how have you made that transition to coaching?
I guess for me, there's a steep learning curve. You can't just fix problems you see as a new coach with your expert knowledge or your recall of experience of what you might have done in that situation. So understanding, learning how different people see the game, looking at the game through different lenses as opposed to maybe just your own or the one that you look through when you're at that specific club as a player. And things change, and no doubt, as everyone experiences highs and lows in life and in sport in general. But along the way, I think if you're open-minded and you're curious, you'll always learn lessons from every aspect. Whether it's a high in a great moment of winning something, or a low. In my case, of being let go from a club and working with different coaches who stretch and challenge you. You've just got to embrace it, be curious, and take lots of lessons from it. And I think the biggest thing for me is do you reflect, and how well do you reflect? Do you reflect on how things are being done well by other people, and how can you do things better yourself? So that's sort of where I come from with it to date, really.
Yeah. Now it's interesting, and I mean in terms of the skills coaching work, this sort of the backs coach, just for our listeners and for myself as well, just sort of interested. What sort of work does that involve? I mean, what I know obviously you could probably do 20 shows on what you do, but just in a sort of nutshell, what does a sort of skills and backs coach do?
Well, a backs coach typically is responsible for the strike moves, backs play within the team strategy. Then you look at more of your individual skill development, individual game management with specific players within the back line. Game management typically works also with your 9 and 10. Potentially sometimes your 15 gets involved in that. And then your catch pass, evasion, high ball, kicking work is more of an individual basis. I think that backs attack fits into the bigger picture, and it's about how much do you give to the bigger picture, and working as a unit and as a small family within the big family is the way that I look at it. And how does that group of players give for the team, and how do we make decisions on behalf of the team? And the perception isn't a selfless backline; it's a selfless backline that give more than they take. Because forwards, they get up from a scrum see in the back, get hit into touch.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I see what you mean. But the thing is that with that, Rory, so for example, for our listeners, how important is it for sort of the backs to be organised, to work on their skills? And one thing I've noticed over the years, I'm no expert in rugby, but certainly from sort of watching it from afar, it just seems to get faster, and the skills just seem to sort of, just the things that they do and on the field is just phenomenal at times, just athleticism. And is that sort of a big thing really in terms of sort of gelling that all together, the actions of the player and sort of getting that organised?
Yeah, the game's evolving year on year, isn't it? If not week on week.
Yeah.
So staying ahead of the curve is key. And working as a group and everyone working to get better every day is really important. I think being organised and being clear as to what the expectations are of each other, and what the team expects of the back line, so to speak. And I like for the guys to be clear in their minds pre-game, going into the game, knowing exactly what organised strike plays we've got, what tactical adaptation we're going to implement that week. The clearer you are going into the game, I think you live in the moment better. And your mind isn't confused, and there's less anxiety, and you can read situations, you can go off plan, because that might be the best solution for that moment in time. So being organised is really important. But I don't think we have to be too structured. And being organised and being structured, I think, are two different things. Organising the week from a coaching point of view is important. Organising the players, giving them responsibility to make sure that they're organising their sub meetings, they're organising their individual skill development, they're organising their meetings with coaches. I think organising can be sometimes just be perceived as organising a group of players into a formation. When I look at it, organising can be preparation, can be the actual on-field practices that you do. So just expanded on organising, I think is part of the evolution of coaching as well.
That's really interesting. And I mean, a couple of questions there that sort of come to mind is in terms of, say, what about the opposition? I mean, how much of an effect does that have on sort of, I mean, obviously, sort of people enjoy watching sort of open rugby and sort of, but how influential is it when you come up against the opposition? Does that sort of dictate the sort of preparation, Rory, in terms of what you do, and depending on who you're playing and the players they've got available too? And
every team you play against, they allow you affordances, whereby you can analyse them and find strengths in their defence, and you sometimes stay away from those, and you can find weaknesses which you try to exploit. So I think in the static moments of the game, scrum and line out, and sometimes kickoffs, if you decide to run the ball or you decide to kick, it's important to analyse and be organised in those elements of the game, because the ball is there, the game is static, and you have time to organise and be quite well prepared as to what's coming or what you're going to try and impose on the opposition. However, saying that, when you move to the more dynamic side of the games, where the opposition isn't quite as organised as they could be, or you've managed to manipulate them and then create opportunities, the game probably then relies more on a style of play and principles of the game of go forward, support play, while you support the space in the pitch, the width of the pitch, how you're looking at the depth of the pitch, where are the opportunities. So I like to look at it, there's moments of static play when you have to be highly organised. Not to say you don't go off plan and you don't react in that moment, but also there's moments in play where it's you play a little bit on instinct and feel and shared affordances. It's communication. Someone might say that there's an opportunity there, and that wasn't the plan, but that's the opportunity that you take in the game. So being organised and being disciplined to get things done in a week is really, really important. But I think the clearer you are going into the game, the more open-minded you can be as to the affordances that pop up during play.
That's interesting, and we see sort of analysis in rugby, Rory. I mean, obviously every team has their own way of analysis, but has technology sort of influenced yourself in any way? Do you think, in terms of the sort of the analysis part of the game, has that had an influence in the coaching as well?
Yeah, analysis is a really important part of coaching science, coaching methodology. It's a tool that you use. Sometimes conversations, meetings, strategic planning can be just as powerful. So I think you can get bogged down and you can sometimes get obsessed with lots of clips and lots of different ways of showing messages to players. But again, it does come with experience. I feel it does come with how you perceive the game, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I potentially say 3 or 4 years ago, might have been a lot heavier on clips and watching lots of footage, which is where I am now. But I might go through another cycle in 2 or 3 years where the game becomes really dependent on the analysis side of things. So I think we work in cycles and waves. So it's a highly important tool. I think matching the data and the video with the context in those situations is really important. When you sort of steer away from the context and how you deliver that to a player, to a group, can sometimes be quite powerful or can be detrimental. From a footage point of view, the camera is quite high. Is the future of video analysis, could we get it at eye level for the player? And then delivery and learning could maybe be enhanced. And shared learning between coach and player might happen in a more productive way. I'm not saying it's not productive now, but is that the future of things?
Things always evolve. Definitely.
We're in row Z, 250 feet high. Looking down on the player and asking him, "What do you think? What do you see here?" But he wouldn't have been seeing it from that angle, and for him to try and relive that situation in his mind again from that camera angle can sometimes be difficult. So I think with experience, you just begin to sort of maybe use a picture and talk through it with the player, and then sometimes a video clip of 30 seconds can be just as useful. So I think it just depends, how you perceive it and how each player wants to learn and how each player engages with the coach. But definitely video analysis is key. You relating GPS to some of the physical demands and coupling that with video is interesting to do. Statistics, relating them to the player, the context and the video. For sure, it's a huge part.
It's interesting, a really interesting take on that, Rory. I think it's, obviously fascinating. I think that's sort of, I'm sure our listeners found that, really interesting, some of, those insights. And one thing that sort of struck me there is the analysis effective in sort of, would it be like a real-time thing as well, in the game itself, or predominantly after the game, or is there a place for it, like in the game itself, in terms of making changes? The more the game gets faster, the more sort of players get sort of closer to similar abilities, and is there sort of a place for it within the game to make a change, or?
I think so. Yeah, hugely. There's lots of different examples that spring to my mind. Their half-time analysis with players, showing a theme to the group, making sure that maybe the clip that you're showing to the team is relevant to everyone and the strategy for the second half. Then there's iPads you can be going around using different individual clips for different positions during half time. If a sub's going on to the field, for example, and he's going on for a specific reason to exploit an opportunity or to maybe stop a strength of the opposition, you can use the video on the side of the pitch as the player's about to go on. So there's lots of different ways of using it. But then I really think it's important to relate it to the individual. Sometimes an individual's understanding could be so high that just a few words and a conversation could just be the trigger for him to go on and be effective. The group might not need video analysis at half time. How relevant is it for the group? So again, it's very contextual, isn't it? But it's all tools that we use as coaches, and I guess it's using the right tool at the right time, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, it's really interesting that in terms of the way sort of sports evolved in general, rugby and many other sports, in terms of technology sort of is having an influence where margins are becoming more and more finer. In terms of your own sort of career in sort of coaching, what would you say some of the challenges for you have been, Rory? Some of the sort of challenges along the way.
I think getting to know people on a personal level can sometimes be tough because of how demanding the sort of performance sport can be. And maybe in my sort of early career as a coach, maybe I was too driven and didn't quite get that side of it right. And now I really value and understand the importance of like relationships and sort of that human side of things. I also think that not being scared to make mistakes and reflect and own those mistakes. In my early days as a coach, I probably wanted to be the bearer of all knowledge, and now I'm probably at a stage where I'm happy to be more vulnerable. I'm happy to either not know or either make if the players think I don't know, I'd be more comfortable with that now. So those for me now becoming really valuable tools and valuable traits that I think are important moving forward. And then just being curious. I think sometimes we probably don't think laterally enough. We sometimes have a vision, a way, and it's full steam ahead. And just being as open and as curious to listening to other people's views and ways of doing things is key. There's lots of different ways of doing things, isn't there? But sometimes we become too tribal, too guarded with our way of doing things and sharing and giving away what you're doing and what you're knowing. I think one thing that Eddie Jones once said was, if you give that information away, it makes you sort of stay ahead and revamp yourself and keep growing. And as opposed to just maybe saying, right, we're going to do it this way and not constantly evolving.
Yeah, that's interesting. Some interesting thoughts there. I'm sure aspiring coaches listening to the show will probably think about that and sort of take a lot away from that. Absolutely, that's really interesting sort of take on that. And in terms of your highlights, or would you say the highlights have been for you? I know that you have plenty of highlights along, but is any sort of highlights that stick to mind that you've had on your own journey? Yeah,
for me, the highlights to date, those moments when I worked at Saracens and giving young guys contracts, it's just such a vivid memory in my mind, and seeing those guys now playing and doing their families proud and themselves proud is such a special sort of memory, because it is hugely hugely fortunate to be involved in pro sport. Not everyone does it, and I think sometimes we don't quite appreciate how lucky we are. So the opportunity to help a player go on a journey and become a professional sportsman, either at a club or play internationally, is by far my proudest moment. I think trophies and winning things, that's also nice. But I think now in life, and the impact of COVID, and we realise how precious life is and how lucky we are. I've been reflecting on those sort of players and watching them now, reap the rewards of their hard work from 15 years of age, and the sacrifices they've made. So that for me would be the biggest highlight.
And is that something that you keep an eye on their sort of career? I know obviously, we all become busy in life and life's plans, but do you sort of keep an eye out for how the players you've worked with in the past are getting on, and sort of is that something that you do, Rory?
Definitely. And there's groups of players you work with, and you can't always have that deep connection and relationship with every single player, but the players that you work with more so from like 15 through to 21, 22, and a constant contact on a daily basis, I guess you sort of become quite attached to those guys and wish them well. And so those guys that I've previously coached are sort of feel a sense of achievement for them when I see them either playing for their 50th cap for their club, their first cap for their club, or making their international debut. So
Absolutely.
I do try and stay in touch and follow them. So that's hugely exciting to see them come through, and then now there's guys that I've never even heard of, but that they've been on that journey with their specific coach, and it's just nice to know that you're involved in the industry, so to speak, globally. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It must be a buzz really to see, like you said, players that are out there and sort of doing well and absolutely. And in terms of say watching the game for yourself, I mean, do you sort of, as a coach, are you able to switch off? And obviously you're passionate about the sport, you love the sport, but do you sort of get the chance to switch off and sort of just sit back and watch other teams play that you're not involved in or have no involvement within, Rory? Or?
To ask my wife, she'd say no, but I think as you get older and more experienced, I think you do